Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Chancellor's Distinguished Lecture Series. It is a new series that we have begun. It'll focus on higher education, bringing in perspectives from key stakeholders, thought leaders from government, industry, foundations, and of course, academia. American higher education has been and still is the gold standard in the world. For public universities, and in particular, regional publics like U of M Flint, an important question to reflect upon is, how well are we serving the community, the state, the region? After all, even with a decline in state appropriation, we do get significant amounts of taxpayer funds. So what is our value proposition? What is our obligations to the families and the taxpayers in the state of Michigan? Why is the public support for higher education declining? No matter what your political stripe is, it is declining. The speakers in this series will challenge us to examine these trends, reflect on why we need to change, and help us focus on what is important and urgent for public universities in the next 10 to 20 years. We are pleased and honored this afternoon that our inaugural speaker is Chancellor Emeritus Charlie Nelms. Charlie believes deeply in the transformative power of education because he has experienced it in his own life. Growing up in poverty in the South as one of 11 kids, Charlie was shaped by his experiences, including the effects of segregation. His parents instilled in him and his siblings that education fuels opportunity. Charlie earned his undergraduate degree from the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, HBCU. He then went on to receive his master's and doctorate from Indiana University in Bloomington. Charlie spent many years in IU, and he broke ground by becoming the first African-American to be appointed as chancellor of an IU campus. He was the chancellor of Indiana University East in Richmond, Indiana. Charlie is a professor emeritus at IU and has received that university's highest honor for service. He has also served as chancellor at North Carolina Central University in addition to U of M Flint. So now a little bit about him at U of M Flint. During his time on campus, he oversaw important changes to the university. An incomplete list of his accomplishments here include the completion and opening of the Francis Thompson Wilson Library, the creation of the Office of Educational Opportunity Initiatives, which since has supported thousands of students in the city of Flint and surrounding areas. And each year, when we mark Martin Luther King Jr. holiday with a day of service, it was Charlie who started that tradition here at U of M Flint. It is an incomplete list, but it speaks to a remarkable legacy that he built that benefits U of M Flint to this day. Charlie holds an honorary degree from Earlham College and the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. He is also the recipient of the prestigious MLK Drum Major Innovation Service Award, which was presented to him by President Obama for performing extraordinary acts of service. Charlie remains connected to this campus and the city of Flint. He serves on the board of trustees at the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation and has kept his connections with many of us here at U of M Flint. He lives in Bloomington and is a Hoosier, but he still says go blue. It is therefore my privilege to welcome Chancellor Emeritus Charlie Nelms.
No horse gets anywhere until it is harnessed. No steam or gas engine drives anything until it is confined. No Niagara is ever turned into light and power until it is tunneled. No life ever grows great until it is focused, dedicated, disciplined. One of the widest gaps in human experience is the gap between what we say we want to be and our willingness to discipline ourselves to get there. Henry Emerson Fosdick. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Chancellor Dutta. I want to begin my comments this afternoon by congratulating you on the recent one-year anniversary of your appointment and commending you for launching the Chancellor's Distinguished Lecturer Series. I shall endeavor not to disappoint you or embarrass you by inviting me to give the inaugural lecture. That's quite an honor, and I appreciate it very much. The eloquent words from Henry Emerson Fosdick capture the essence of my comments today. They challenge us to create the community we say we want by taking the proverbial bull by the horns. 26 years ago, this past July 1st, I commenced my duties as the fourth chancellor of the University of Michigan, Flint. I assumed my responsibilities with an enormous amount of optimism and enthusiasm after being hired by President Jim Duderstadt. He was one of the most authentic, committed, and effective university leaders with whom I had the privilege of working during my more than 4 decades, really, of leadership in higher education. President Duderstadt's charge to me resonated profoundly. I was to help the campus transition to a more urban institution. I saw Flint as an ideal place to apply the lessons I had learned as a faculty member in the urban environs of New York City, Gary, Indiana, and Dayton, Ohio. Those experiences combined with my twin passions for excellence and equity, and a third passion attribute, a tireless work ethic honed in the Arkansas Delta, convinced me without a doubt that I was up to the Herculean challenge presented by President Duderstadt. Little did I know that there were strong pockets of resistance within the faculty ranks to increasing the University of Michigan Flint's urban character in terms of the profile of the students served, the composition of the faculty and staff, and its curricular offerings, research agenda, and community outreach, among others. While I suspected that many members of the university community did not share the views of some, they were reluctant to publicly support a strategy that would catapult the campus into a position of leadership with respect to university-level urban education. Regrettably, the vocal minority controlled the narrative, a narrative centered on the assertion that the chancellor did not support the liberal arts, that increasing student diversity would lead to the lowering of academic standards, and that chancellors come and go, but faculty are constant. Even today, those issues continue to be all too prevalent in many circles in the academy across the United States. The above issues notwithstanding, I must tell you that I developed an enormous affinity for the citizens of Flint and the University of Michigan Flint. I became friends with some wonderful people, and those friendships have withstood the test of time. Thanks to the generosity of the C.S. Mott Foundation, the Charlie and Janetta Nelms Scholarship Endowment has a market value of more than $200,000 and provides 10 scholarships annually to first-generation and minority students at University of Michigan Flint. As a member of the Mott Foundation Board of Trustees for the better part of a decade now, it is an honor to support grant making not only in Flint and Genesee County, but around the world. Based on my last count, I'd given more than 2,000 speeches over the course of my career. And in fact, I went back and I found a speech that I gave as student body president in 1967. And it scared me, some of the things that I was saying at the height of the protest movement. But nevertheless, most of those speeches I don't remember. Some of them I remember, but most I do not. But the sheer number, the volume of speeches that I given did not really register with me until I gifted my personal and professional papers to the Indiana University Archives in 2019, and a university truck arrived to pick up the boxes. And there were more boxes than I had even imagined. As the inaugural speaker of the Chancellor's Distinguished Lecture Series, it is my aim not to give a lecture that will simply entertain you. Rather, I want to bring a message. Now, for those people who don't know it, there's a difference between a message and a speech. And so if you have any questions about that, maybe we can do some email exchanges once this is all over and all of that. So I want to bring a message that enlightens and encourages you and that compels civic, corporate, university, and philanthropic leaders to act. In part one of my remarks, I want to spend some time reflecting on 3 watershed times or initiatives that literally changed the face of higher education and serve as a basis of my optimism about the role urban universities can play in community revitalization. In part 2, I will discuss 5 prerequisites for community revitalization and identify concrete examples of the kinds of programs and activities I believe urban universities like the University of Michigan, Flint, should offer, and in which I'm convinced, let me say it again, I'm convinced that corporations and foundations must invest if they have a genuine commitment to community revitalization. Let's get started with those watershed events. The first is passage of the Morale Act of 1862. This was arguably one of the most important pieces of education legislation ever approved by the United States Congress. Also known as the Land Grant Act, it was named for its lead author, Congressman Justice Smith Morale of Vermont, and signed into law July 2nd, 1862 by President Abraham Lincoln. The act gave each state 30,000 acres of public land for each member of Congress the state had as of the census of 1860. States were permitted to sell the land and put the proceeds into an endowment fund, which would provide perpetual support for land grant colleges. Because of legalized segregation prohibiting Black and white students from attending school together, Black colleges were excluded from the 1862 Act. However, attempts at corrective action were undertaken nearly 3 decades later with passage of the 1890 Land Grant Act, which included Black colleges and tribal colleges. Now, the most striking difference between the 1862 Act and the 1890 Acts respectively was the substitution of meager sums of money in place of land in the 1890 compared to 30,000 acres of land in 1862, which allowed the endowment of the cohort of all white land grant institutions to prosper. Now, more than 125 years after passage of the 1890 Land Grant Act, historically Black colleges and universities and American Indian colleges are still suffering the cumulative effects of legalized segregation, which resulted in inadequate funds and the inability to implement high quality, competitive academic programs. Yet, there are those who would argue that systemic racism is a figment of the imagination of Blacks like me who have tried unsuccessfully for years to make the case for reparations in higher education. Through Higher Education Association mergers and name changes, the original group of land grant colleges and universities has morphed into an association of 79 land grant universities, 216 campuses, 26 university systems, enrolling more than 5 million undergraduates and 1.3 million graduate students, awarding 1.3 million degrees annually, employing over 1.3 million faculty and staff, and conducting nearly $50 billion in university-based research. That's the land, that's how that morphed into that. And in the state of Michigan, of course, we all know Michigan State is a land grant institution with a powerfully and profoundly important kind of mission, not only in Michigan, but around the world. I cite the Morale Act as a watershed event because it helped transform agriculture, engineering, and technical education, not only in the United States, but in North America more broadly. I also cite it as a watershed event because it not only increased educational access for the working class, it also expanded the curriculum to include disciplines beyond the liberal arts and classical education. Furthermore, the Morale Act was an example of what could potentially happen in urban universities and communities if university leaders, trustees, and local, state, and federal leaders were to come together to pursue a common agenda around community revitalization. What is vital to urban communities is strategic and sustained investments in public education for historically disenfranchised people, health and wellness support services for the most vulnerable populations, safe and affordable housing for seniors and other low-wealth citizens in the community, relevant and responsive workforce development training, and access to high-quality associate and baccalaureate degree-level post-secondary education, which can be successfully leveraged into increasing the technologically oriented job market. You have to be able to leverage all of those skills. While short-term grants have their place, what is needed now more than ever are long-term interlocking investments. It is past time for collaborative grant making involving the city of Flint, the state of Michigan, Genesee County, philanthropic partners, and the federal government. Think about that powerful kind of potential of that partnership. The issues facing urban communities have been a long time in making, and they are unlikely to be successfully remediated in one or two multi-year grant cycles. A perfect example, and there's a perfect one and I love it, it's a wonderful example of the significance of long-term strategic funding is the unquestionable quality of both the facilities and the programming of the Flint Culture Center. It is a powerful example of the kind of thing that I'm talking about. In the midst of writing my memoirs, 18 months ago, there were moments when I found myself experiencing a range of emotions, sadness, anger, and disappointment in reading and reflecting on the irrational yet consistent history of apartheid and racism in America. I was reminded of how far Blacks and other historically disenfranchised people had come, but also just how endemic and prevalent American-style apartheid and racism still are in 2020. I was reminded of the disconnect between what people say, what they believe and feel about others, and how their actions actually play out in an opposite kind of way. But I digress. I want to return to discussing why I think the 19 Civil Rights Act and the Higher Education Act of 1965 were watershed events in American life. Passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act is clearly one of the most sweeping pieces of federal legislation impacting Blacks and other low-wealth communities since Reconstruction. Enacted July 2nd, 1964, by President Lyndon B. Johnson, the Civil Rights Act was a concrete outcome of years of agitation and demonstration under the auspices of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, led by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Many social scientists and political analysts underestimate, I believe, just how much collaboration and cooperation took place between the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and the National Urban League on the one hand, and a plethora of other organizations such as the National Council of Negro Women, the American Civil Liberties Union, the Anti-Defamation League, and the National Council of Churches, among others. While the 1964 Civil Rights Act outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origins, it did not end discrimination. It outlawed it, but it did not end it. Its passage created a legal basis for challenging discrimination and for the creation of programs at the local, state, and national levels designed to increase opportunities for women and ethnic minorities. Countless lawsuits have been filed by both individuals and organizations alleging reverse discrimination. Several of those lawsuits have made their way to the US Supreme Court, including a current case filed against Harvard University alleging discrimination against Asian American applicants. The case is eventually expected to reach the Supreme Court. Let us be clear about one thing. The hard-fought anti-discrimination solutions won by Black civil rights organizations benefited all minority groups and women. Let me repeat that. It benefited all minority groups and women. Yet it seems that the most likely to be adversely impacted by court rulings are Blacks. The third and the final watershed event I want to mention this afternoon is passage of the Higher Education Act of 1965. Prior to the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, it is estimated that approximately 95% of all Black students attending college were enrolled at one of the nation's historically Black colleges and universities. I was one of those people who attended one of those schools, and with few exceptions, those institutions are located in the South. While the 1964 Act outlawed discrimination and segregation, it was passage of the 1965 Higher Education Act that enabled Blacks and other low-wealth students to attend college. The legislation created the nation's first federal need-based grant program, originally named the Basic Educational Opportunity Grants. These are known today as the Pell Grants, and this program was renamed in 1972 for the late US Democratic Senator from Rhode Island, a man by the name of Claiborne Pell, whom I had a chance to meet early in my career. He was a relentless advocate for educational opportunity. In addition, for making grants available to students rather than giving colleges and university financial aid directors the authority to determine who receives a grant, the 1965 Higher Education Act created several programs known as TRIO programs. Some of you in the audience will remember the TRIO programs: Talent Search, Upward Bound, and Student Support Services, all of which had a stupendous impact on increasing college access and success for low-wealth students, period. Not just low-wealth Black students, but for low-wealth students, period. Today, listen to this now, today, more than 6 million students benefit annually from the Pell Grants, 6 million. While Pell Grants provide access to more than 5,000 colleges and universities, including those in Flint, Michigan, it is the collective impact of federal grants and subsidized loans that have increased the probability that students will avail themselves of opportunities that many didn't even have any idea that they existed. There are currently 45 million borrowers who collectively owe, unfortunately, $1.6 trillion. Let me say it again to get that straight now. 45 borrowers who owe nearly $1.6 trillion in student debt in the US, according to the Institute for College Access and Student Success. In 2018, 39% of undergraduates received Pell Grants, down from 41% 4 years earlier. Now, the reason for citing these three watershed initiatives is to emphasize the point that there is evidence, demonstrable evidence, to support the view that with the confluence of leadership, resolve, will, and focus, the American people have succeeded in tackling some of the seemingly most intractable social issues imaginable. Using these three watershed moments in our education, I want to turn my attention now to the central premise of my talk, which is the belief that Flint can become a model for economic development, educational attainment, and improvements in the quality of life for all its citizens, especially those from marginalized and historically disenfranchised populations. I would posit that there are at least 5 prerequisites for capitalizing on Flint's potential. Although reprehensible, I believe the water crisis made Flint a more resilient and unified community, a community poised to triumph like a phoenix. It revealed the strength of the community and reminded me of the words of that reggae artist Bob Marley, who proclaimed, quote, "You don't know how strong you are until being strong is the only option you have." You don't know how strong you are until being strong is the only option you have. The question is this. Here's the question. Does the community recognize its strengths and how best to leverage them in becoming the kind of community it envisions? I believe the first step in becoming a more vibrant and self-reliant community is for its leaders to take stock of its assets and work collaboratively on leveraging them. Without being exhaustive, I have identified 9 core assets I believe can serve as a foundation for Flint's revitalization. In 2019, 4 colleges and universities in Flint, Kettering University, Mott Community College, Michigan State University, and the University of Michigan Flint, collectively enrolled more than 17,000 students. He said, let that sink in, more than 17,000 students, and employed nearly 5,000 faculty and staff, offering a total of more than 100 degree programs. These 4 institutions provide educational opportunity while contributing to the local and regional economies. While the number of automotive manufacturing jobs in Flint area has declined significantly since the 1980s, General Motors currently employs more than 9,500 workers in Genesee County, with many holding high-wage, high-tech jobs. Since 2015, Lear Corporation, Peckham Incorporated, C3 Ventures, and more than a dozen other businesses have established or expanding operations in the Flint area, bringing nearly 1,500 new jobs to the community. With its airport in proximity to major freeways, railroads, seaports, Flint is a key gateway in the I-69 international trade corridor. I want you to listen carefully to what I'm about to say now. 11.5 million tons of freight are transported through the area each year, providing a significant economic boost to the greater Flint community. Few communities of comparable size can claim the range and quality of cultural amenities found in Flint, Michigan. The Flint Cultural Center attracts more than 650,000 visitors a year, and its member organizations have long provided educational outreach to schools in Flint and beyond. Collectively, the endowments of the Flint Cultural Center institutions are valued at nearly $161 million. Area residents have access to high-quality health care via 3 hospitals, not 1, but 3 hospitals: Hurley Medical Center, McLaren Flint, and Ascension Genesis Hospital, and such providers as Genesee Health System, the Greater Flint Health Coalition, Hamilton Community Health Network, Mott Children's Health Center, and the Flint campus of Michigan State University's College of Human Medicine. Flint is home to the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, one of the world's most respected philanthropic institutions. Since its launch in 1926, the Mott Foundation has made nearly $3.5 billion in grants. Yes, I said $3.5 billion, including more than $1.2 billion in support for the greater Flint community. The Community Foundation of Greater Flint works assiduously to help improve the quality of life of area residents. Thanks to the generosity of the Mott Foundation and more than 19,000 other donors, the Community Foundation currently has assets of more than $262 million. The final asset that I want to lift up for your consideration is this. In addition to the Mott Foundation and the Community Foundation, Flint is home to more than a dozen other philanthropic institutions, including the Ruth Mott Foundation and the United Way of Genesee County, whose funding supports positive impacts for area children and families. The significance of such vibrant philanthropic sector in Flint is further evidenced by the swift response to local needs sparked by the city's water crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I think even the most subjective person would agree that these are core assets that any community anywhere in the United States, indeed anywhere in the world, would love to have. So I want to suggest to you that the glass is half full, not half empty. So here is the question. Here's a question, and I always have a question, and we should always ask the question. How can these assets be leveraged to the greatest advantage of all members of the community? How do you leverage your assets? And I want to share with you some prerequisites that I believe are essential for community revitalization. You got to reach a consensus on community vision. You got to have a consensus around that vision thing. During my leadership journey, I've come to believe that values drive vision, and vision drives focus. Let me say it again. I've come to believe that values drive vision, and vision drives focus. I don't care how great your camera is. Unless you focus, you're not going to get a good photograph. I don't care how many assets you have. Unless there's a consensus around the community's values and aspirations, those assets will lie dormant, untapped, and unused. The vision of which I speak is not the sole domain of the local Chamber of Commerce, the City Council, the Mott Foundation, the county commissioners, concerned pastors, or any other entity that exists for serving the Commonwealth. The vision of which I speak, is not only shared by all, but it is one to which each makes a commitment to do what is required to make that vision a reality. Vision in and of itself is useless unless you can get people to come around and embrace it, lift it up, without going into detailed discussion of what is involved in creating a consensus around community vision. Suffice it to say that I believe essential elements include the engagement of a broad spectrum of participants, including elected officials and neighborhood residents. And let me just pause to say something about neighborhood residents. Neighborhood residents are smart people. They're smart people. They have an enormous amount of firsthand knowledge of what it's like to be a member of that neighborhood. Not just that city, but of that neighborhood. And we have to make sure that those individuals are involved, including elected officials, stakeholders listening to each other. Now, a lot of people think hearing and listening are the same, but you gotta listen, and you really have to hear what it is that each is saying. Developing and prioritizing and articulating concrete but flexible timelines for achieving the goals and the priorities that have been identified. I've discovered that any plan is a little more than a desk document collecting dust unless there's a commitment to implementing it and there are clear metrics of evaluation. It's just another nice looking document. And in this day of technology, we can create some pretty PowerPoints and all of that kind of thing, but all of that stuff is useless unless we really commit ourselves to implementation. So here's some elements, I believe, of a comprehensive community-centric plan. Exemplary P12 schools that serve the needs of all students, safe neighborhoods no matter which side of town you live on, accessible and affordable cultural opportunities for all, relevant, high-quality workforce development initiatives, post-secondary education programs responsive to local, regional, and state needs. People should not have to leave their communities in order to take advantage of the education that they have acquired. And then finally, a network of communities willing to work collaboratively across what I call superficial municipal boundaries. I could go on, but I hope you get my point about the importance of keeping people at the forefront, indeed the center of the vision for the community. The second prerequisite is distributed leadership. As a student of higher education and an activist, one of the most important lessons I learned on my 50-year leadership journey is this: no matter how much vision leaders espouse, vision is not an acceptable substitute for action and achievement. Distributed leadership is generally defined as a conceptual framework to understanding how the critical elements of leadership interact among the people given the complexity of an organization and the conceptual framework of the issues being addressed. In distributed leadership, rather than solo leadership, in distributed leadership, the collective empowerment of individuals is just as critical, if not more so, than the formal role of the leader or the largesse of a wealthy donor. Some managerial experts opine, and I agree, that the reason why many organizations and communities achieve so few of their stated goals is because they are too fixated on the influence of the leader rather than the collective power of the people. The collective power of the people served. In his book, We Are the Ones We've Been Waiting For, The Promise of Civic Renewal in America, Peter Devine, the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs and an endowed professor at Tufts University's Jonathan M. Tisch College of Citizenship, advocates for a new citizen-centered politics, capable of tackling problems that cannot be fixed in any other way. Let me go back and say that now. It's a little tongue twister for me. A new citizen-centered politics. Citizen-centered politics. Although he did not create the phrase, Barack Obama, the 44th president of the United States, used it as a rallying cry for mobilizing millions of people across racial, ethnic, gender, and socioeconomic boundaries, which led to his election to the highest office in the land, not once, but twice. I cite distributed leadership as a critical prerequisite for community revitalization because there are a handful of communities and neighborhoods that have found their way back from the precipice, and they might serve as examples of the arduous challenges involved in creating sustainability and community wholeness, which urban communities like Flint and many others in mid-Michigan and other parts of the country face. Flint is a community with a respectable number of emerging and mature leaders who have demonstrated a consistent and transparent willingness to lead rather than simply preside. And y'all, there are a lot of people who are presiding. They're not leading, they're presiding. And what we need in this day and age, not only in Flint and in Michigan and the United States, we need people who are willing to lead. Equally, the people that I have met in the greater Flint community, not 20 years ago, but more recently, last spring, last fall, they are vested in the community's well-being, and they have made a deliberate decision to remain in the area. The point is simply this. If we want excellent schools, safe neighborhoods, justice-centered police departments, great hospitals, and a vibrant local economy, among other things, we the people, yes, we the people, must become part of the distributed leadership team that delivers more than platitudes and promises. We the people, we must be prepared to stay in the battle for a lifetime of leading, collaborating, pausing, and starting over, rather than waiting for the next bailout or the leader who will come and deliver us from ourselves. The third prerequisite that I want to share with you is governance reconsidered. If one were to look across the boundaries of local government throughout the United States of America, you would find more than 19,000 incorporated cities, towns, villages, and more than 13,500 school districts. Just to cite two examples. In Genesee County alone, there are 11 cities, 17 townships, and 5 villages, and multiple school districts. While there may have been a time when such governance structures worked, I would argue that the time is very much in the past, very much in the distant past. I could go even further and suggest that these superficial boundaries are deterrents to collaboration and long-term community sustainability. Consider, for example, the issues like economic development and transportation system. Typically, workers come from multiple metropolitan statistical areas, or MSAs, and are not just the community in which a business may be located. Similarly, expressways do not end at one city or county boundary and pick up at another. Consider the case of the I-69 International Trade Corridor, which spans not only city and county boundaries, but state and country boundaries. Regrettably, it seems that race and the socioeconomic status of the inhabitants of various municipalities has taken on a larger than life meaning than it should when important decisions such as K-12 education surface. Is it not time to consider a uni-governance structure rather than individual, duplicative, and expensive governance structures? I'm just asking. Even if it's rejected, why shouldn't communities give themselves the courtesy of considering other more effective and responsive governance structures? Just imagine the cost savings and the potential effectiveness of a consolidated P-12 educational system. I know you all are saying that fellow started meddling now. Yes, I am meddling, and the chancellor invited me to give the first in the series of this new series. And then I want to mention finally, new university programs to address new needs. New university programs to address new needs. As a student of higher education and a professor, I would argue that today's American system of higher education is based on an antiquated model. Yes, I said it, an antiquated model, namely the Harvard model. I don't mean to insult anyone who's a Harvard graduate or Harvard lover, but I love Harvard. It's a wonderful place. Founded in 1636, Harvard University is still viewed by many trustees, educators, accreditors, and administrators alike as the pinnacle of excellence. The closer an institution conforms to the Harvard ideal, the more acceptable it is. To be sure, there are some concrete examples of exceptionality, namely the community colleges, technical colleges, and for-profit providers of post-secondary education. Time does not permit me to delve into detailed explanations relative to observations immediately above. Perhaps in the post-COVID-19 pandemic, I'll be able to come and sit and talk with you face to face, okay? But I believe institutions like the University of Michigan Flint can aid in community revitalization by doing the following. First, the Board of Regents must empower UM Flint to offer redesigned or new programs that address the needs of the region without subjecting the campus to lengthy traditional periods of review. 2, collaboration with Michigan State University Division of Public Health, College of Human Medicine, and Mott Community College must take on new levels of specificity and urgency. 3, building on existing collaboration between University of Michigan Flint and the Flint Community Schools in early childhood education, consideration should be given to expanding into other areas, such as STEM, special education, alternative teacher education and licensure, and the training of paraprofessionals and of principals to ensure availability of a cadre of teachers who are ready to teach and administrators who are ready to lead rather than preside. 4th, I'm glad you're sitting, because this may cause you to stand. The politics of charter schools aside, they exist. Students are enrolled in them, and their effectiveness must be enhanced. In fact, I wonder aloud if it is time for University of Michigan Flint to consider establishing in collaboration with Flint schools and others, a K-12 charter school. And 5, finally, I want to say, the recently established Flint College of Innovation and Technology reflects the kinds of programs that respond to regional economic development needs and have relevance for other areas like healthcare, social work, entrepreneurship, and small business development, environmental science, nonprofit management, and arts administration, among others. Chancellor, I want to commend you in the strongest terms for having put forth this whole notion of this new college. It is past time, and I wish you all the best. In a word, it is time for urban universities to stop mimicking traditional research universities in their quest for relevance, responsiveness, and excellence. It is time for urban universities like University of Michigan Flint to stop complaining about minority students not possessing the prerequisites for success in various academic programs at the collegiate level, and start creating the pre-collegiate pipeline from early childhood education all the way to the university level, to start creating that pipeline. They have all that oil in Alaska, but they can't get it out without a pipeline. We have all of these products being produced, but we can't get it to areas of distribution without the I-69 corridor. So what we have to do is to build a pipeline. And then I did say finally, and I have a tendency to say finally multiple times, but this is the final one that I want to lift up to you. As an activist and advocate for equity and excellence, one of the most important lessons I learned is this: everything is important, but not everything is of equal importance. Everything is important to somebody, but not everything is of equal importance. Thus, corporations and philanthropic entities must be willing to invest in at least 3 types of programs or 2 types of initiatives that strengthen and sustain communities. Those that address basic human survival needs, those that incentivize people to thrive, and those that allow organizations to experiment in their quest to find more effective approaches to community sustainability. Finally, it's not enough for urban universities to be engines of opportunity for teaching, research, and service. They too must be engines of applied research, seeking solutions to a plethora of challenges that stymie the quality of life for its citizens. 2 current examples include addressing the long-term effects of lead poisoning on the learning needs of students and assessing the impact that a lack of technology has on learning for low-wealth populations in general and students of color in particular. At the University of Toledo in Ohio, scientists are searching for new ways to address the growing threat to water, drinking water in Northwest Ohio. The early work was supported by the Ohio Department of Higher Education's Harmful Algal Bloom Research Initiative and the Ohio Sea Grant. The success of the early project helped the University of Toledo receive a $1.1 million grant from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to expand and continue to develop new technology. At Virginia Commonwealth University, VCU, formed a venture with the state of Virginia and the city of Richmond to create the Virginia Biotech Park. VCU's business school contributes to the development of the companies by providing business planning advice. The center has sparked new businesses and jobs. Listen to this now, 26 companies have been born, 75% of those companies from VCU faculty research, a powerful tool in attracting the best faculty and brightest students. These are just two examples of what universities can achieve through innovation and collaboration. While there will always be more areas in which to invest and resources available, I contend that philanthropic and corporate communities must be willing to engage in long-term collaborative grant making if they wish to receive a return on investments commensurate with their expectations. Equally important, they must be willing to lend their expertise to helping grantees achieve mutual goals for the community. As I bring my comments to a close, I want to return to that poem or those words that I shared with you upon commencing my talk. No horse gets anywhere until it is harnessed. No steam or gas drives anything until it is confined. No Niagara is ever turned into light and power until it is tunneled. No life ever grows great until it is focused, dedicated, disciplined. One of the widest gaps in human experience is the gap between what we say we want and our willingness to discipline ourselves to get there. I leave you with this last question. Does the greater Flint community have the will to envision a more vibrant future for itself and the energy to achieve it? Let us respond with a resounding yes and be about the business of getting it done. Thank you, Chancellor, for inviting me, and thanks to all of you who have been a part of this afternoon's gathering. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, we are ready to get underway with some questions. We have just 5 minutes remaining. So Dr. Nelms, I'm going to go ahead and read the questions that we've received so far to you. And the first one comes from a former colleague of yours, Dr. Mary Jo Sokelski. And this is the question. Flint has become a symbol of environmental injustice and other systems of racial and economic oppression. And as you point out, Flint has also become a symbol of resilience as a result of events such as the water crisis. What is something the university and community could do right now to intensify and expedite revitalization?
I think to take on, first of all, hi, Mary Jo. I think one of the first things that the community and university can do together is to look at the existing opportunities you have and things you're already doing in the area of faculty research and engagement and that kind of thing, some really good things going on, and look at ways for increasing that kind of level of support. And not everything that you need to do is new. There are existing opportunities that can be built upon, and that would be the starting point from my perspective. Okay, our next question is from James Lyons, and he asks, what must we do to help faculty understand that an urban university is not a second-class university? Well, you know, that's an excellent question, very important one. And I think one of the things that we can do is to think about some mini MINI sabbatical opportunities for faculty members, where a faculty member who's interested can go and spend a summer or a period of time actually interacting with a community-based agency or entity. It may be a business, it may be a not-for-profit agency, but really provide them with those real-time opportunities and to incentivize their participation by either including it as a part of their workload or to compensate them with modest amounts of money.
Okay, our next question comes from Professor DJ Trella. Chancellor Nelms, thank you for these thoughts, remarks, and thanks in particular for mentioning how vibrant the Flint Cultural Center is and what an asset it is for the community. I asked this question as a Flint faculty member and also as a member of the board of the Flint Cultural Center Corporation. What ways and means do you see for Flint collaborating more meaningfully with the Flint Cultural Center for the betterment of the Flint community?
Well, it's been a while since I've been there, but one of the things that I think is really important is to have the Culture Center become part of I don't mean merging them, but I mean have students and faculty and staff see the Culture Center as a real asset for them as well, as opposed to needing to reinvent everything. So if there's a speaker series, there's a speaker series, or if there's a theatrical group or whatever, do things collaboratively, as opposed to saying you got to have your own in order to demonstrate that you have, that it's yours, okay? So I think greater collaboration, look for opportunities for collaboration. And given the range of academic programs in the arts at University of Michigan Flint, whether it is in the performing arts or whether it is in art and architecture and all of that. I mean, the Culture Center has a wonderful college of glass blowing. I don't remember what the exact title is, but I just think that there's a lot left on the table in terms of collaborative opportunity. And I would just challenge people to start there.
Excellent, thank you. We have the final two questions. The first one comes from Mia McNeil, who is our Director of Government Relations. She writes, I love the idea of the partnership with P through 12. However, is it possible to create a strong partnership with P through 12 when leadership often changes? Is there a way to ensure the continuity of a partnership regardless of the leadership changes so students and staff have continuity?
So I think, yes, I think that there's a way to increase the probability of success, and that is for the university faculty and staff to take a more active role in it. Okay, as opposed to waiting for someone else to be responsive. I mean, in other words, there's a way for us to work together, okay? And that would be the challenge that I would have, as opposed to saying, and I'm not saying that the person asking the question is doing this, but we tend in the academy to look at people outside and say, well, why don't they do X, Y, Z? Well, I think what we have to do is to make ourselves part of the they. We are the people, we are the they, we are they. I know grammatically that, but go ahead to the next question, last question.
Okay, we have two more questions, so I apologize for that. Our next question is, how can urban universities collaborate with other institutions that enroll similar populations of students, such as HBCUs and other MSIs, to become models of best practice across higher education?
It's simple, get out of your comfort zone.
Okay.
Start with a project, start with something small and grow it into something larger. So don't wait for houses aren't built from the top down, they're built from the bottom up. And so I think strong, sustainable partnerships must have a solid base, solid foundation. Start with something you can do, deliver, and move on.
Okay, and our final question for today. What are your thoughts about research faculty appointments, not just teaching to promote collaborative research in the community? So
will you repeat the first part?
It is, what are your thoughts about research faculty appointments, not just teaching to promote collaborative research in the community?
I'm not quite sure I fully understand the question, except to say this, is that I think that there is a place for research, okay? No question about it, there's a place for research. But I think that some of our promotion and tenure processes, as I said, are based on a research university model, as opposed to, and so there's a place for what we call pure research, and there's a place for applied research. And I think what we have to do is to take a look at the mission of the institution, the needs of the community and the region, and to come up with a way to make sure that those are addressed. I'd have to know more about the context to come in further.
Okay, well, thank you for that. We have come to the end of our time. And so we want to thank everyone today for the excellent participation in our very first Chancellor's Distinguished Lecture Series. Thank you, Chancellor Nelms, for the inspiring, thought-provoking talk today. We certainly enjoyed it. There will be more information coming up available to the campus community on future lecture opportunities. Thanks again. Stay safe, stay healthy, and go blue.
Thank you.